Let's imagine that tomorrow morning you wake up to a 9-figure fortune due to having a last name literally everyone in the world has heard of since childhood, the surname Disney. What would you do with such immense power? Would you use your name to finance that one movie you've always wanted to see, all the while indulging in the excesses that only the elite can afford? Or would you dare to criticize the empire that made your wealth possible? For Abigail Disney, the answer is clear: disrupt, speak out, and shake up the status quo. Indeed, this isn't just another heiress story, and Abigail, the granddaughter of Walt Disney's brother Roy, isn't lounging in Malibu or rubbing elbows with the Hollywood elite. Instead, she's spent decades carving out a name for herself as a filmmaker and philanthropist, all while taking on billionaires, including her own family's company. In today's episode, we'll dive into the world of a Disney member who's not afraid to wage war against her own legacy, as we describe Abigail Disney, the heiress who can't stand her family's multi-billion-dollar company. Abigail Disney isn't your run-of-the-mill heiress lounging on inherited millions. In fact, the granddaughter of Roy O. Disney, co-founder of the Walt Disney Company, still has a net worth around $120 million in 2024. And yes, her fortune comes from the family legacy. But she's spent her adult life proving she's got more to offer than just a famous last name. And her first act was a clever power move, taking the reins of Fork Films, the New York production company she co-founded and where she serves as CEO and president. Under her watch, Fork Films churned out a slew of critically acclaimed documentaries, from The Queen of Versailles to Pray the Devil Back to Hell. Then, with The Armor of Light, she took on the role of director, solidifying her reputation as a filmmaker willing to tackle tough subjects. But Abigail's real showstopper is her philanthropy. While her ancestors built a theme park empire and an arsenal of assets worth drooling over, Abigail's distanced herself from the glitz and glam. No beachfront Malibu mansions, no towering Manhattan penthouses. She's not exactly trying to be the face of the jet-set lifestyle. Indeed, while many wealthy heirs cozy up with yachts and private islands, she's proud to say that she's handed over a staggering $70 million of her own money since turning 21. And, not content with just writing checks, she's also made it her mission to critique the very system that made her rich. Indeed, Abigail's lambasted billionaires who she claims dodged taxes and flaunted the sort of conscientious wealth stewardship that sends most tycoons hiding behind their PR teams. But the ultimate anti-capitalist mic drop is she publicly declared that she won't touch the family's Boeing 737 private jet because it's, in her words, climate cancer. We bet the family's probably still wincing over that one. But her divergence from the family ethos even extends to her political contributions. In a move that made headlines, Abigail announced she'd pull her funding from the Democratic Party unless Joe Biden steps down from the 2024 presidential race. A bold stance that may border on the anti-democratic, she's no stranger to writing checks for candidates who align with her social activism. It's not all virtuous headlines, though. Critics accuse her of hypocrisy, of bemoaning excess while still profiting from Disney stock dividends. But for all the detractors, Abigail's candidness about wealth inequality and the grotesque spending of the super-rich is hardly common among those in her tax bracket. And if her critics think she's going to lose sleep over their opinions, well, they probably haven't met Abigail Disney. Yet, in order to best understand how one of the world's most famous last names could churn out such a prolifically outspoken heiress, we need to turn back the clock a bit. In the next chapter, we'll explain how the origin story of the Disney family directly leads us to Abigail's legendary activism. The Disney family's ascent to American success is a narrative deeply rooted in ambition, perseverance, and, of course, a touch of magic. And their origins trace back to 11th century Normandy, where the name was once d'Isigny, a moniker evoking their hometown Isigny-sur-Mer. As the family migrated, the surname evolved, first morphing into Disney when some members crossed the Channel to England. By the 19th century, the Disney lineage had shifted once more, this time from Europe to North America. Thus, it was Arundel Elias Disney, Walt's great-grandfather, who made the critical leap. He departed Ireland in 1834 with his wife Maria Swan and their young son Keppel, setting course for Ontario, Canada. This move would lay the groundwork for the American chapter of the Disney saga. Keppel, true to the family's pioneering spirit, established his own roots in Canada and had several children, including Elias Disney, born in 1859. Like his father, Elias sought new opportunities across borders, which led him south into the United States. In 1888, Elias married Flora Call, forming a family of 5 children including Walt, born in 1901 in Chicago. And, as was typical of many families in search of stability during that era, the Disneys moved often, eventually settling in Marceline, Missouri. It was there, amid the rural Midwest, that young Walt began nurturing a penchant for drawing and a fascination with trains, 2 passions that would define his early years. But Walt's path to success wasn't linear. By the time he reached 18, he was already trying his hand as a commercial illustrator. These early steps, however, were shaky at best, and in 1920, his first venture, Laugh-O-Gram Studios in Kansas City, showcased Walt's flair for animation but lacked the financial footing to survive. The company went bankrupt within 3 years, leaving Walt destitute and armed with little more than $40 and a dogged determination to forge ahead. Undeterred, he set out for California to join forces with his brother Roy, where they established the Disney Brothers Cartoon Studio. Their initial creations gained traction, particularly the character Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, which found a modest following. Yet, the brothers were dealt a harsh lesson in the ruthless nature of business when they lost the rights to Oswald to their distributor. It was this setback, however, that catalyzed Walt's creativity. On a train ride back to California, he sketched the rudimentary outline of what would become the most recognizable character in animation history, Mickey Mouse. But the debut wasn't without hiccups. The first 2 Mickey shorts, Plain Crazy and The Galloping Gaucho, fizzled without securing distribution deals. Yet Walt, ever the opportunist, was quick to leverage the nascent technology of synchronized sound. Their third Mickey short, Steamboat Willie, premiered in 1928 with full sound synchronization, a novelty that left audiences awestruck. It was an overnight sensation, putting the Disney Brothers on the map and turning Mickey into a global icon. With Mickey's success, the brothers turned their focus to broader horizons. Throughout the 1930s and 1940s, they produced a string of animated hits that redefined the industry. The crowning achievement came on the 21st of December 1937 with the release of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the first full-length animated feature film. This project, dismissed by many as a folly, proved to be both a critical and commercial triumph, earning enough profit to bankroll the studio's future endeavors. What followed were other revered classics such as Pinocchio and Fantasia in 1940 and Bambi in 1942. Walt's ambitions, however, stretched beyond film. On the 17th of July 1955, he opened Disneyland in Anaheim, California. And the theme park attracted over 28,000 visitors on its opening day, setting a new standard for immersive entertainment. Certainly, Disneyland's 4 original sections, Frontierland, Tomorrowland, Adventureland, and Fantasyland, offered an unprecedented experience for children and adults alike, all radiating out from Main Street, USA, the thematic nucleus of Walt's vision for a fantastical realm of wonder. After Walt's death in December 1966, Roy Disney postponed his retirement to see through the completion of Walt Disney World in Florida, which opened in October 1971. A labor of love and devotion, the park embodied Walt's dreams for an even grander experience than its predecessor. And, as Roy poignantly declared, "We are going to finish this park, and we're going to do it just the way Walt wanted it." The dedication ceremony for Walt Disney World doubled as a tribute to Walt's life philosophy, showcasing Roy's deep commitment to carrying forward his brother's legacy. Sadly, Roy himself passed away just 2 months later, on the 20th of December 1971, leaving behind a company firmly planted at the summit of the entertainment world, a company that continued to grow, adapt, and lead. In the years that followed, the family's role in the company evolved, with a new generation, such as Roy E. Disney, son of Roy O. Disney, making their own mark. And therefore, it was Roy E. Disney's daughter, Abigail Disney, born on the 24th of January 1960, who would go on to become an advocate for social causes and a critical voice of the very same brand the family created. Abigail Edna Disney arrived in the world on the 24th of January 1960 in North Hollywood, California, a locale already stamped with the undeniable mark of her family's achievements. You see, by the time she took her first steps, the Disney name was firmly established as a hallmark of entertainment and ingenuity. Her father, Roy E. Disney, was a prominent figure within the Walt Disney Company, holding roles as vice chairman of the board of directors and chairman of the animation department. Yet, it was her grandfather, Roy O. Disney, and her great-uncle, the legendary Walt Disney, who had set the stage for an empire that would redefine American popular culture. Consequently, from a young age, Abigail found herself in a world imbued with Hollywood's unique blend of privilege and pressure. Her family, a cornerstone of the entertainment industry, sent her to the prestigious Buckley School, an educational establishment synonymous with nurturing the children of Hollywood's top echelons. And the Buckley School, in the 1960s and 1970s, was a cradle for future leaders and trailblazers, with a demanding curriculum that mixed intellectual rigor with creative freedom. But Abigail was no ordinary student. Amidst the children of stars and studio executives, she made a deliberate choice to carve out her own identity rather than bask in the glow of her family's achievements. And though her father's name opened doors, it was Abigail's tenacity and determination that ensured she left a mark of her own. With Buckley behind her, Abigail set her sights on Yale University, a beacon of academic prestige and social influence. She delved into English literature, a field that required the sort of nuanced analysis and critical thinking skills that suited her perfectly. The ivory tower of Yale, however, also challenged her to question assumptions, confront privilege, and expand her worldview beyond the confines of her upbringing. Graduating with a Bachelor of Arts in 1982, Abigail emerged not just as a product of Yale's academic traditions, but as a thinker poised to confront societal issues with a sharp, critical lens. Eager to further her intellectual pursuits, she pivoted to Stanford University, which in the early 1980s was buzzing with the pioneering spirit of Silicon Valley. Enrolling in Stanford's master's program in English literature, Abigail found herself at the intersection of the traditional humanities and the burgeoning tech world, an experience that undoubtedly broadened her perspective. But it was at Columbia University, where she eventually earned a PhD in philosophy, that Abigail's intellectual pursuits took on a sharper focus. Philosophy, with its exploration of ethics and human nature, provided her with a robust framework to tackle the thorny social and economic issues she would later face. And her dissertation, an exploration of the romanticized violence in American life, foreshadowed her future endeavors in both activism and documentary filmmaking, where she would shine a light on inequality and corporate malfeasance. During her time at Columbia, Abigail began teaching at Iona College in New Rochelle, New York, where she lectured on English and American literature. Her role as an educator was more than just a job. It was a proving ground where she honed her skills in communication and engagement, a prelude to the advocacy work she would become known for in later years. Then, in 1988, Abigail married Pierre Norman Hauser, a move that signaled a new chapter. Together, they raised 4 children, balancing familial responsibilities with Abigail's increasing involvement in social causes. Yet even as she navigated personal milestones, she remained acutely aware of the responsibilities that came with her last name. Now it wasn't until adulthood that Abigail began to grapple with the stark disparities within the Disney empire. What began as a quiet observation about the inequities between executive compensation and workers' wages soon evolved into a full-fledged crusade. You see, Abigail Disney's activism began as most reckonings do, with a letter. A Facebook message, to be exact, from a Disneyland cast member who described their financial struggles despite being employed full-time. And the Disney heiress, who had long assumed the company was a bastion of corporate benevolence, was stunned by the reality of her family's famed kingdom. It was 2018, and Abigail's notion of Disney magic was about to meet its harshest critic: herself. Within a year of this revelation, she already made national headlines, calling then-CEO Bob Iger's $65 million compensation package for 2018 insane, and openly lambasting the fact that his earnings were more than 1,400 times the median pay of Disney employees. Unsurprisingly, the comments reverberated through the halls of power, sparking fierce debate over income inequality and whether corporate leaders had any real obligation to those at the bottom rungs of the ladder. Next, in May that year, Abigail went beyond media appearances and social media outrage, taking her crusade straight to Washington, D.C. Before the House Committee on Financial Services Subcommittee on Investor Protection, she testified, urging that Disney, one of the most profitable companies in the world, should simply do better. Pay the employees a living wage, she implored. And if it meant a slight dip in stock value or a less extravagant executive bonus, so be it. However, words and appearances were not enough. Thus, in July 2019, she took the radical step of seeing it for herself. Undercover and unannounced, she spent a day roaming the parks as just another guest. But what she saw went beyond just strained smiles and long hours. She spoke with employees who described living paycheck to paycheck, despite decades of loyalty. She subsequently left the park furious, reporting that some employees were even rummaging through garbage bins for food. The Walt Disney Company swiftly dismissed her assessment as a gross and unfair exaggeration, but the damage was done. Her critique had become a thorn in Disney's well-manicured image. Then, when the company passed the CEO baton to Bob Chapek in 2020, Abigail was far from hopeful. If anything, she argued that things might get worse, noting that Chapek had overseen many of the transformations that she believed eroded worker welfare. Undaunted by the change in leadership, she continued pressing for systemic shifts, even as her critiques fell on corporate ears grown comfortably deaf. Therefore, it was around this time that Abigail began working on a documentary, a deeper dive into the very issues she had been railing against. The American Dream and Other Fairy Tales, co-directed with Kathleen Hughes, premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in January 2022. The film juxtaposed the extravagant wealth of Disney executives with the stories of park workers struggling to make rent, and the title alone was a direct jab at the idealistic image her family's company had projected for nearly a century. Public release followed in September 2022, bringing mixed reviews. Critics who praised its daring tone were countered by others who found it somewhat superficial, with more emphasis on emotional appeal than on a hard-hitting economic analysis. Still, the documentary revived debate on wealth inequality and corporate ethics, keeping Abigail's activism firmly in the spotlight. Yet Disney's heiress had no intention of stopping there. By the end of the same year, she had joined forces with the Patriotic Millionaires, a group committed to advocating for higher taxes on the rich. Suddenly, her focus wasn't just Disney, but a broad range of issues, from climate change to wealth redistribution. She called for higher taxation on private jets and for greater scrutiny of corporate practices everywhere, morphing into a voice not just for the oppressed, but against the unchecked power of the wealthy class. And then came 2024, Abigail's most surprising turn yet. In an unexpected move, she withheld her donations to the Democratic Party, declaring she wouldn't support the ticket unless President Biden stepped down as the nominee. The statement sent shockwaves through the party's elite fundraising circles. However, somewhat unsurprisingly, when Biden endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris for the 2024 presidential race, Abigail reversed her stance. On July 22nd, she pledged her support anew, going so far as to announce that she would host a fundraiser for Harris's campaign, asserting, "I am supporting her with all my heart." Thus, although still maintaining a net worth reportedly over 9 figures, Abigail Disney is, for better or worse, content with activism and political engagement more than simply twiddling away the family's money. And now we'd like to see you in the comments. What is your opinion on Abigail Disney's career? Is she a great example of not letting wealth stop you from helping others? Or is she simply another rich person using their influence for partisan activism? We'll be curious to hear your thoughts on this one. And thanks for joining us for another episode of Old Money Luxury. With that said, cheers, until next time.